Nice. Again, this question comes to mind is what, as since you've entered this space, since you've been engaged with heroic cards, what has been the one thing that's like stood out to you as far as like something you didn't expect or like a lesson or a gift or something that you've experienced from being engaged in this psychedelic space?
Oh, wow. A lot, but what primarily comes up right now is it's more of a sense or a feeling more than a thinking or insight. It's this deep connection to this healing and transformation that I get to witness. I'm a privilege to get to witness.
Yeah.
Seeing veterans specifically who have had a really challenging experience, whether, all the way through their lives, and then they go through this process of psychedelic therapy, and they honestly look like 1,000 pounds have been lifted off of them, just in a short matter of time, in a few days, like their face color comes back to their face. They look lighter, they appear lighter, and it's truly inexplicable. And how stark of a contrast that is to some of the other therapies that are offered to them traditionally in our country. So, yeah, it's really just witnessing that transformation and seeing this spirit come back alive in an individual.
Yeah, that moment where you get to see, like you said, somebody come back to life, right? Like
Yeah.
and there's no words for that, right? There's no lecture, there's no like, it's like impossible to communicate what that's like until you like are fortunate enough to get to see that, to get to witness that in person. Yeah, I mean, it's that's the gift right there, right? To be
Yeah.
a witness in that moment is such a privilege. It's so humbling, right? Like it's so humbling to see somebody willingly say, yes, I want to engage in this process of healing, knowing that there's so much unknown that we're stepping into, right? So it's always interesting for me. It's like informed consent for the psychedelic journey. And we're like trying to describe to somebody, okay, this is
Yeah.
what we're going to do. Do you consent to that and everything else we don't know? And these guys and many others are like, yeah, let's go all the way. And you get to participate on the front end, right? You get to meet the guys and do the screenings, and then you also get to sit in the space with them, which is for them. I can imagine that it's got to feel like a nice supportive transition to have a familiar face
Oh, yeah.
and a veteran himself, right? To be there from the beginning, to enter that consultation, that clearance, to manage the anxiety and the questions leading up to the actual departure of that big event, and then to be sitting next to them in the space like
Yeah.
that. That's a real gift. That's not often the way it goes.
Yeah, there is a special connection, primarily through the veteran connection. I've seen it in the clinical space, practicing as a PA in the Western medical system, that a lot of veterans will see providers and just immediately they don't feel a connection, right? It's a provider who's just been in school for decades, and they
Yeah,
have no real connection to the military, and so from the start they don't feel seen or heard, and yet there's this super strong bond connection immediately when there's a veteran on the other side of you, meeting you as just a human being rather than someone with a title or a white coat. And
mm,
then, as you mentioned, watching them, from the medical screenings all the way to the integration phase, I'm lucky enough to be able to see some people through all of that. And, they kind of light up when they hear that I'm able to be on the retreat with them. Um, I sense it's maybe some medical safety right there, and they feel like they have a
right.
Quran or a doc with them on this deployment sort of
Yeah,
that they're going on, and so it makes them feel really comfortable. So it's really nice to add that layer of safety for them. And one thing that came to me when you were mentioning this, seeing this different person come back to life, I think one of the most profound ways to see it is when you see their significant other see them for the first time, or
yeah,
just hear the stories of when they reconnect. And a lot of times the significant other is just like it's like they haven't seen that person in 5 years, 10 years. 20
right.
years of their military service. So like I have my partner back. And like to
Yeah,
hear that, that is just like so moving. And it's like to see that validation in that from their partner who's been with them for decades. And then they're like, oh my gosh, like he came back and or she came back. And so
yeah.
that's pretty
I've heard
special.
others. Yeah, I've heard that exact statement mentioned by other veterans when describing their stories. It's like, yeah, my wife said, my husband said, "Oh my gosh, you're back,"
Yeah.
right? Like to
Yeah.
be back to the person that you fell in love with is pretty incredible.
It
Yeah,
also brings up the importance, and I want to acknowledge it here, that like the spouse also encouraged to seek this type of path if they want to, because it's just not the veteran that struggles. It's the spouse, right? And then having the veteran go have this healing and come back, it really shifts the dynamic in the household, right? All of a sudden you have this person back, but how do you deal with that as a spouse, right? So Heroic Hearts does a really good job of offering spouses the opportunity to go on their healing journeys, and sometimes the spouse goes before the veteran, which is pretty incredible. So I'm really proud of that aspect of Heroic Hearts as well.
yeah. I think that's a really important that one. That's like incredible that they offer that. But you use the you said disruptive, right? Like when you have one partner, well, you're we're all doing a dance in our relationships, right? And the longer that goes, and sometimes those dances are healthy, and sometimes we're just getting by, right? Or sometimes it's very dysfunctional. But nevertheless, we get used to those to some degree, right? We
Oh, yeah.
expect a certain type of exchange. And then one person has a big healing, and then they come home. And yes, my partner is back, but now what do I do?
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't even know how to relate to this person, or this person feels too much, like it's too much, right? Like, oh
Oh,
my
yeah.
God, this person wants love, they want touch, they want intimacy, verbal, emotional intimacy. And I'm not used to engaging in that way. So now maybe it causes me to retreat because I don't know how to do this dance, right? And so
Oh, yeah.
what have you seen in that part of things?
Yeah, it's something that it goes beyond this like individual going on retreat, right? You're a lot of the times, initially I was focused, oh, okay, there's one veteran or this group of veterans, we're sending them on retreat. But then thinking about the second, third order impacts of their healing, we want to celebrate them, but then they go back into this family unit. And I've heard from spouses like, it's been 20 years that I've just been in this bracing position of like,
Yeah,
shoe going to drop in this tension, or how do I need to shelter the kids from
right.
something that may be disruptive in the household? So it's like decades of that navigation for the spouse. And then all of a sudden the veteran comes back and they don't need to do that, or they are doing it, but it's in a bit of conflict with the new healing
Yeah.
that's occurring for integration. And it's a real dynamic, complex dance. And so, yeah, there's a lot there. And that's why it's really beautiful that the spouses have the opportunity to do that as well. And they get opportunity to get prepared before their
Mhm.
spouse, the veteran goes. So it's not just like right after the veteran comes home. The spouses can be involved from the beginning of the journey with the veteran. So it's really great.
Yeah, that sounds like nice and inclusive, like really thought, right? Like systems, right? We're talking about relational systems. What I see is like when in a relationship, any family system or any workplace, when somebody starts to change, right? Somebody goes on a psychedelic healing journey. It may be one, and journey could mean a path of healing, right? Where there could be multiple experiences. And we start to come back into our lives with this desire of, well, we feel different. Our narrative is different. Like I like to think about it like, our voices and our stories are finding a new balance, right? There's maybe a negative one that's getting quiet, and there's a new voice of kindness and softness or curiosity and playfulness that's trying to find a space to let that part develop and be nourished in community, right? At home with loved ones. And if we don't have a place, a partner, a space that is understanding kind of developmental process to some degree, right? Where we're relearning how to relate from this new
Oh, yeah.
sense of center and self. right? If that's not received, or it's energetically pushed back, or it's criticized, or it's uncomfortable, and then I know many of us have experienced this, then we start to contract, right? We start to kind of
Oh, yeah.
close back up, and we start to slowly kind of go back to where we were, because the space we came home to is not safe, or is not
Yeah.
ready for this new version.
Yeah,
And
not
as
ready.
we can, yeah, and then we contract back. And I know for me, it would be like, oh, I didn't do it right, or now I feel like I'm always going to be this way. I get frustrated, I get angry, I get like, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
I, my new version was not held and supported, and therefore I felt almost like abandoned, like in this,
Mhm.
my new version is not loved. I should just go back to the way I was.
It's very common,
Yeah.
especially with the family dynamic. And that's why in the risk assessments that I do, the medical screenings, like it's not just about pharmaceutical contraindications or interactions or toxicities. Like we dive into who do you have in your life for support. And often, many times I'll be like, well, it's my wife or it's my husband. And
Hmm.
that's great, but it kind of raises a bit of a flag for us because we want to see and hope to build some type of support outside of just the spouse,
Yeah.
right? For just the reasons you mentioned of if you, for some reason, don't feel like you can expand into that new space you described with your spouse, and we really want you to be able to find it somewhere else. And what comes to mind is like men's group or different outlets that you can set up that are not your significant other.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a lot to hold, right? Like we
Yeah.
have these experiences. It's hard to put words to. We feel different in our bodies, in our minds, in our spirits. We want to live in a different way, and then it's how do we go home and explain that, right? It's really hard. But if we have somebody to speak to that understands those experiences, right? We can never fully understand somebody's unique experience, but if we've had our own experiences, it's a lot different, right? Like you and I have both had our experience. We can share about our experiences, and I'm like, yeah, Tommy gets it. He knows what I mean when it was really challenging, right? He knows that can be a spectrum of many things that we probably can't even comprehend or put words to. And I don't need to explain that to you, because I
Exactly.
know that you've been in that space of, oh my gosh, why is this happening, and why did I choose to do this right now? And so it's really nice to have somebody else to help you hold that story, right? To hold that experience, that community of men or women or other veterans, whatever the constellation of the group is. If we're able to put this out right into the center of the room and allow others to hold it with us, then we don't feel in isolation, right? And so there's a better chance that that part will flourish as opposed to extinguish.
Yeah, what came to me is I think really important to think about is to have a space where you don't need to explain anything. And I think that's a really important thing to bring into this work is cultivating a space where you can come back and you don't need to explain anything. You can if you want, but like having a space where you can just go and feel no need to have to fight to be understood. Yeah, that's ideally what we hope people go back to or can find through different
Yeah.
groups.
I like what you said, that I don't need to fight to be understood.
Yeah,
Like, I think I can see that before, right? And before the journey, like where there's a disconnect in our relationships because we're kind of trapped inside ourselves, is the way I like to think about it, right? For me, it was like a feeling of being trapped inside myself and not being able to put the true self out. One,
Mhm.
I didn't know what that was, right?
Yeah,
And part of this process is finding who that is, and how do we then do that. But yeah, trapped inside the self, or they're not being fighting to be understood or heard. And what a relief when you don't have to do that, right?
yeah,
Like I was thinking about, we're talking a little bit about more from like the client, the journeyer perspective of feeling supported and going on these experiences and having community to help hold. And I would like to shift a little bit over to like the provider's side of the experience. And so I was thinking about like you've worked in clinics, you've worked one-on-one with patients, you're working in groups, and you're doing like your work has transformed and shifted. But you've always been in, not always, but you've been in the role of caregiver, service provider, holding and caring for others, and hearing many stories and incredible probably situations that many people navigate day to day. And I was thinking about as a coach, as a facilitator, as a therapist, whatever our role is, right? We take on all these stories, right? We hear all these stories, and we can do great work in keeping our boundaries, energetic hygiene, our rituals, and keeping good boundaries on our work so that we feel resourced. And still, we sat with somebody and we listened and we absorbed to some degree, right? Because I think there has to be some permeability in order to connect and empathize with the person, right? It's just a matter of how porous we are, right? So
Mhm.
managing that, but that has also a cost to it, right? It's a gift to be able to connect, but there's also a cost that comes with that. And I remember when I first started working as a ketamine therapist in Boulder, I was also running groups online for the training company that I was working for. And I had just started working as a ketamine therapist. And it was like you got, two, maybe three ketamine sessions in a day. It was just twice a week. So I had three clients at a time doing 2 sessions a week for 3 weeks, plus the integration, plus my private practice, plus teaching and the program. And I logged in to run this group with students, and we did the whole group. And then there was this guy in this space. I'll just say he was an elder in the space, and he had plenty of gray beard, had lived life really hard as a psychiatrist, had had enough experience with clients. And he goes, "Can you hang on for a moment after the group?" And I said, "Sure." And it's just him and I, and I'm like, "Hey, how's it going?" And he's like, "How are you doing?" And I was like, "What?" He's like, "How are you doing?" And he's like, and I told him, I said, "Not great. Actually, I'm exhausted. Like I'm seeing these clients in the ketamine space. I got these clients, I got all this teaching. There's a lot of output. I'm running these groups. And but the new factor was the medicine space, was the ketamine space. And
Mhm.
so he was like the first person that pulled me aside and was like, you gotta work on your posture, on your breathing, on your visualization, your
Mhm.
energetics. How are you keeping yourself resourced during these
Yeah.
sessions? Because otherwise you're going to wear yourself out. Yeah. And I was like, thank goodness this elder was like brave enough to be like, I see this to him, a young person, right? We need to get ahead of this.
Yeah.
We need to get ahead of this. And what's been your experience with that? Is that
Wow, what a beautiful story to have someone reach out and ask you how you're doing in that moment. And yeah, be able to see that, right?
yeah,
For me, it's unique, especially in the provider space and the Western conventional medical system. We do a really great job of taking care of patients, especially in certain circumstances, end of life, keep you alive, emergency
yeah,
medicine. But yet, there's not a lot of attention brought to how we take care of the providers. And I think that is a real big contrast to indigenous wisdom and medicine of, yeah, the providers and healers, curanderos, they get run ragged, yet there's a community there that understands what they're going through and they support them through it.
mm,
And in our culture, I don't think there's a lot of the support there for the providers going through medical school, right? It's so overwhelming and it's all about productivity and how you're going to be, you got to work, 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 work. But rarely do people ever stop and ask you how you're doing. Kind of on the contrary, if you do ask for help, it's kind of shunned.
yeah,
So I just want to recognize how beautiful that is that a provider witnessed that and took a moment with you to ask how you're doing. So that's beautiful. For me, yeah, I think it's been a interesting transition because I've been in kind of straddling the two places of conventional Western
hmm
medicine and then stepping into this space, especially with Heroic Hearts project. it's this overwhelmingly I'm overwhelmed by the love and support and acceptance. Like I don't even know how to handle it at times, you know? Like for the first time, they're like, well, how are you doing? What do you need? And I'm just like, what? No, that's not how this works, you know? And so it was hard to accept it. And it brings a lot of, um, yeah, just really deep gratitude for being in this space now and with people that recognize that. And then also some sadness about seeing the other side that continues, the providers
Yeah,
that I see that they need somewhere to go to release what they take on. And it's not common to find that. It wasn't in the training, right? We didn't talk
right.
about it, but still don't talk about it to like go seek support for this type of work. And it's not common. So that's why I love what you're doing here and creating because it's much needed in the provider space.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it is, it's something that I leaned on really heavily when I was working in community mental health. Like, don't cancel my supervision. Like, if my supervision gets can't my one-on-one with my supervisor, it was
Yeah.
such like a big exhale
Yeah.
that anytime it got bumped or moved, like it was upsetting.
Yeah.
Like you would never think that it's like it was almost like a mini therapy session, right? Because it's like, yeah, let's talk about your caseload, but how are you doing? What's going on at home? What's coming in from home? Like how is that showing up in the work? And I know that that is has been invaluable for me. And so in this new group that's starting in a couple weeks, and I hope to have other offerings of it. I'm calling it like Men's Practitioner Alliance, and so the kind of the vision of that is this men's group where we get to show up as men, and talk in the way that we speak, and relate in the way that we do. There's a practitioner aspect where we can bring in a clinical conversation. We have therapists, we have physicians, psychiatrists within the group. And then, yeah, and then some folks are working in the psychedelic space, some folks are working in traditional, services. But to have a space where we can, one, support each other just getting through life, right? Like, what are you navigating in life? Two, what do you need support on right now, right, in your personal life? And how do we make create a safe space where you can be witnessed, right? You can be witnessed in that story. And the relatability of these stories is something that always
Mm.
is funny, right? It's like you're struggling with that too. I feel the same way, right? So now I'm not isolated in my world, right? I think, and also oftentimes there's a lot of virtual work. So we sit at these computers, we have
Yeah.
our sessions, we close it, and then 10 seconds later, maybe we're engaging with our family, and there's no transition,
Hmm.
right? There's no drive home, there's no walk, so we're supposed to flip from, I just listened to all of these stories, to now I'm supposed to be the partner, right? That's going to engage with dinner and do all the other things. And so
Oh, yeah.
to create a space we can have clinical conversations, personal conversations, and then also the layer of like what it is to be a man in society today, and what are the stressors associated with the roles that we've been conditioned into, the roles that we accept, the roles that we reject or push against, and how do we find a balance in all of that in the space, and then to create a group that hopefully continues beyond my participation, right? And so I want to help folks cultivate this group, this connection, and to also have it be how do we launch you now into the world as a group of peers that are bonded over being in this group, so you can support each other. And how do these individuals then, how does that radiate out into their coworkers and their networks to normalize what it is to be in a group, to be supported by others? And maybe there's others that will create their own versions. So that's my vision, my fantasy, and maybe someday to have an in-person experience, right? Where
Yeah.
these small group of men can come together and celebrate all the time and all the work they've done together online before meeting in person. And I mean, you've been in the men's groups. I participated myself, and there's nothing like that in-person experience. Like it's just really magical when you get that together.
I wanted to mention the piece about finding support. For me, it's important to find it outside of the workplace. I mentioned the workplace for me in this space, right? Heroic Cards Project, very supportive. Yet it's also really, I think, important to have a space outside of that. of safety, right? You're not with coworkers when you're explaining
Right.
some situation or something with life. There's some type of intimacy that is nice to have when people are around that aren't part of your organization. So that's a real big benefit for me with the men's group. And I, yeah, I was reminded when you said sharing in the space, it's really magical because a recent experience in the men's group of someone, one, the safety and feeling comfortable to open up and release something they've been carrying for years and years and years. And in the men's group, like it was synchronistic and a universal cosmic happening that another person in that group had a very similar situation as you just described. Like that happens a lot. And it was just this beautiful moment of like, yeah, being able to release this emotion into the space and be held by someone that had a very similar situation. It was really beautiful to witness. And, I see that only being able to happen in a really intentionally curated space. And thanks to you for doing that and spearheading it. And, a lot of times it's things outside of the psychedelics themselves that are the most powerful. And that was a situation that was.
Is there anything when you think about the men's group, um, what has been like what have you learned? Like
Mm.
it doesn't have to be in particularly your story, but like what have you absorbed in transmission by just participating in that type of format and what was your apprehension before also? Because I think
Yeah,
yeah.
they go hand in hand. The first thing that came to me goes hand in hand around apprehension and then what I've learned, which is I was scared initially because I've never been part of anything like a men's group aside from the Marine Corps, which is can probably be considered as a pretty big men's group. But that was complete opposite of like this men's group that gets together and talks about their feelings in life. And so I was very nervous. One, just wanting to, social anxiety of like, oh, how am I going to fit in? Am I going to
Yeah.
say something stupid? How am I going to look and act? And so that was there for the first kind of the first two in-person meetings. And yet it decreased every time. And this most recent one, it seemed to fall away completely. So, and I contribute that to how beautiful the individuals are that are in the space of like you can show up and be yourself and authentic and be seen, and there is just zero judgment. So I guess some of
Yeah.
the apprehension going in was worried that I'd be judged, that I'd be
Mhm.
criticized, that I would not feel like I could have a space to express myself and be vulnerable. And yet something, I found the opposite. It was so much the opposite. It was hard to accept.
Right.
Really loving
It's like
forward. And just the understanding of each individual. For me, one moment that stood out was like I was really struggling and I really wanted to speak with one person of the men's group to process it because that's where I felt most comfortable. And I was about to do that, and then two other members came by and like sat down, and I mean, they sensed it. Like it was an energetic transmission. And the two that just showed up, they're just like, "Do you need a second?" And I didn't know what to say, and they're like, "Yeah, we'll give you a second." So like they just like knew, and they just like sensed, and it was just this love, like through and through,
mm,
of like sensing it, being aware, right? They were just so in touch and aware that I didn't even need to say anything, and they just like
oh,
understood. So that's just like a little thing that sticks with me of like people just like are on the same wavelength. No need to like go into an explanation as we were talking about. You don't need to explain yourself.
yeah, thanks for sharing that. When you were talking about that apprehension or like that fear of being judged or like how am I gonna I was kind of like laughing to myself inside because I was thinking I felt the same way too when I was gonna facilitate the first group.
Mm.
Like the first time I was like, hey guys, I think we should do a men's group. And this is kind of what it's gonna look like. I felt like oof, on the like I'm like pushing these guys one, and then they're stepping into that role. We all yeah, I had that fear of like, oh, what if I don't do this right? What if I don't hold these guys in the way that they deserve to be held, right? So I think it like there's like this responsibility. You want to respect the men in the group. You want to show up as fully as possible. You want to deliver on what you said you're going to deliver, right? So in my side was like, how do I cultivate a space and an experience, and logistically also, how do we do all of this so that these men can come in and just be themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so there was a lot of learning in that process for me.
Right.
Did I forget something? Is this going okay? Is the
Yeah.
constellation of the group okay? Is that it, who's not speaking? Who needs to get pulled in a little bit more? Who needs a little bit of space? Right? Am I the right person to speak to them, or should I ask one of the peers to connect with them because there's more relatability there? And so I think these are all the things that you also do in groups, but these are like the things in the background of when we're working in a group, is that not only are the logistics and the time and the schedule and the topics and all the conversations happening, but we're also energetically tracking who's pulling back, who's leaning in, who's overwhelmed, who is shutting down, right? Do we need to slow the conversation now? Do we need to create space? Does somebody need a one-on-one? Do we need some humor,
Yeah.
right? Can it do it, like we've done enough work? Let's take a breath, right? Let's take a breath, right? And so
Yeah.
I think those are all the things that we hold as the individuals that are running the group, right? To our best, to our ability in that moment, in that time. And it's not always going to be perfect, right? It's there's times where we're going to come up short because we're just like everybody else in the group,
Oh
right?
yeah. Absolutely.
So, my
And
work's never done. I was
y-
like,
yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Well, one, I part of the reason why my apprehension decreased so quickly was, from the way that you cultivate and curate that group and all the things you just mentioned that were going through your head in setting up the group, like, from the outside, like didn't even notice, right? It was just like so beautiful and beautifully run. And one other thing that's really amazing about the group is like I could show up and I was working through that social anxiety and apprehension and judgment. And like I could work through the process in real time there in the group, in the share
mm,
circles, right? I didn't need to like note it and then go home and talk to my counselor or someone else. Like it was so safe and beautiful because you can show up as yourself, whatever mess was coming with me, right? Like I could work through that in real time in the weekend and thinking about how that's the power of it, right? You don't need to like stow it away and save it for another
right,
time. So that's a very huge aspect of the group. And to your point about how showing up as the facilitator, yeah, it is extremely challenging. And for me, it's just it is a wrestle with like, oh no, I want to look like the part. I want to talk the part. I want to look like I know what I'm doing. But that you just need to recognize like and share with the group. For me personally, it's just like, hey, I'm human too. If I say something that doesn't align, like please let me know. I'm
yeah,
human. We're all just human here. And I think that's a big distinction for me coming from the Western medical space of like, for me, conventional medicine is like, I'm in charge.
expert,
I'm
yeah,
the expert. I'll tell you what's good for you. And in this space, we're just all human beings sharing space. And so
yeah.
um, that's kind of how I view it. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, thank you for that.
Um, well, yeah, I wanted to ask um, about I think the most important piece and the most challenging piece of these these practices and therapies is after the actual psychedelic journey or experience. I see it as just a small catalyst in the equation, but the majority of the work is comes afterwards with integration. And from my time in the space, I see a lot of sacred medicine being used and then just not a lot of support afterwards.
Yeah,
A lot of, the sensationalism is, hey, come to this organization or this company and healing center and we'll have you, experience this healing medicine. And then it's just like, okay, we'll see you later. There's not a lot of follow-up or structured integration. What is your view and philosophy, vision around integration? Yeah, what does that look like for you?
yeah. So when I think about integration, there's many different experiences, right? A ketamine experience is different than a psilocybin experience and a, ayahuasca or whatever medicine you're engaging with. And so I think what I learned early on, when I was going through my own healing process with ayahuasca was a little, I think I could have had more support in that process. Like it felt like I was trying to, I had a therapist that I was going to, but they had never done psychedelics. And so there was this like, well, I don't want to share too much because you think I'm super weird already. So there was a little limited there. So I'd like to have people have a different experience of that, obviously, right? And so when I think about integration and when I work with clients and integration in the ketamine practice or through my coaching, I like to see like what's happening right now. Like we have the journey, right? And sometimes the journey is magical. It's there's clarity, there's clear visions or messages or things that we receive that there's feels like there's no doubt, right? Like I feel like I grieved something or I feel like I connected with a part of myself that hasn't felt love in a long time. And so those are very tangible things that we can explore one on one, right? I like to bring those things to life in the space. And so, like, if we're talking about, well, I felt this like feeling of connection, or I felt love for my child self, and I saw this. So I like to roll it back and be, what did that actually feel like in your body, right? Where did you feel that in your body? What did you notice in your mind and your thoughts and your sensations in that moment when you first felt that? Right. And how do we bring that back? Is there a particular song that was playing in the moment? Is there a particular scent or something that was present in the room for you that can help anchor those, right? So that we can bring it back to life and connect with it when we want, right? When we need that reconnection. Because I think when we are landing back into life, sometimes we're landing smoothly and we have that beautiful glowy tail as we head into life and we feel connected. And sometimes we just slam back into life and it's so harsh
Hmm.
that it feels like the thing that just happened over there wasn't even real, right? And it
Oh,
gets squashed right away. Oftentimes you hear a lot of that, right? Like I came back to work, I went back to life, and it just feel like I was being punished for taking time for myself. So that can breed a lot of frustration and doubt and resentments for whatever your life, the people in it, the demands on you. And so I like to then go, if that's happening, I like to go, okay, well, what's happening in your day to day, right?
mhm.
If the journey was great, or the journey was hard, or the journey was confusing, or the journey was the hardest thing you've ever done, great. How are you showing up in your life today? Like, how did you sleep? How was your dinner? Who are you talking to? Are you in partnership with somebody? Did you go out to dinner? I want to hear about your day because sometimes when we're struggling in integration or we've been stuck in a long depression, we can't see the good that's happening in front of us, right? And so if I'm asking you, like, well, tell me about your day. Tell me what you did. Was there anything that stands out to you? No, no, nothing, nothing. Okay, well, tell me about your day some more. Tell me about, and so when I find that little thing, oh, I went to dinner and you know what? Normally I'm agitated because it's too loud, but I wasn't. Or the waiter or the server messed this up, or I engaged with them more, right? Or I interacted with my kids or my partner. I found I had more patience, or I found that I wasn't as reactive. Okay, so
Mhm.
I want to take all of those little instances and I want to bring them to life in the relationship and the conversation that we're having, right? Because that's symbolic, right? That's symbolic that there's a new part of yourself that is coming online, that something is quieting down. And as magical as the psychedelic experience was, and as beautiful it is to explore and find symbolism, and all of that is really beneficial too. For some of us, we just need the practicality of like, how am I going to bring this into my life and how am I feeling different today? Maybe your nervous system feels a little calmer. Great. Like, let's celebrate that, right? But I
Right.
think life can move so fast that then those things get lost along the way. And in the conversation, we can bring those to life and celebrate. Wow, so you are sleeping better. What's that like? Right? When was the last time you were able to sleep? Right? And so all of those little expansions of that inner world, so that they can make it like tangible, right? What's the color of it? What's the texture of it? What's the energy of it? How does it make you feel in your body? So I like to focus on that part when I'm thinking about integration. Um, and the boundaries. Let's not forget the boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
I love.
boundaries that we were talking about that earlier. You were talking about in the heroic hearts
Oh yeah.
section of the partner journeying also because the relational boundaries are different. And oftentimes that's like, oh, I would normally react in this way, but now I'm just leaning back. Or normally I wouldn't compliment or say thank you, but now I'm noticing all the little things in my life. And so when we start to speak these things that we withhold, right, especially the positive things in our relationships, when I'm able to say thank you, I'm proud of you, I appreciate
Mhm.
that, right? Sometimes those things are taken, we don't say them and we just move on or we assume they're taken for granted. But to hear your partner say thank you for bringing
Yeah.
me my coffee, or your partner says I adore you, right, or your partner gives you, and you can actually feel it, you can actually feel it. And so exploring what's it like to speak and relate to somebody that you love in your life, how does it feel different in your body when you have a conversation with them, how is the quality and the intimacy of the conversation different. And so these boundaries are being stretched and redefined. That's what comes to mind.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I What came up for me was this like aperture. The medicine will like open this aperture, right? Or peek behind a veil. And as we come back to normal life, like the aperture, right, will kind of close down a
Yeah,
little bit. And what I got from you is this like integration is just like find the little thing that will just open up that aperture a little bit more, right? The noticing, like, wow, that person cut me off in traffic, yet I'm here happy as a pig in mud, right?
yeah.
Like I'm sending love to that person. Like I've never done that before. Just like those little, and then noticing, right? Keep the aperture open and then continue to notice. And yeah, that is such a powerful practice. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, I love how you explain that, and I agree with you 100%.
yeah, and I think part of it, well, and it's a nonlinear process, right? And so we're gonna have days where we're able to do that and feel those things, and we're gonna have days where we feel like we've slid back to where we were, right? And I
Oh yeah.
think it is this. I think it is part of the. I always like to describe it as like, yes, I had this healing experience, whether it was a retreat, a non-medicine retreat, men's group, or maybe it was a retreat that involved psychedelic experience, that we have these moments of growth, right? We have these moments of expansion and growth, and then we contract a little bit, right? I like contract, or you can call it rest, right? So we're resting a little bit, and then we enter another cycle of growth, which could be relational. It doesn't have to include a psychedelic experience, right? It's relational. It's saying yes to the things that make you uncomfortable, right? If I would normally do this, then maybe this time I'll do something different. And so, and then we have these cycles, and that that saying yes reminds me when I was in grad school at Regis University, and I went to this Colorado Counseling Association like board meeting, public meeting, and I went to this. Had some friends that were going, and I knew the professor that was involved. I go, and he's like, yeah, you should be on the board, and you should put your name in to be like vice president and president, and like you should be part of the leadership. My initial reaction was cold sweat, nausea. There's no way I'm doing any of this.
Yeah.
And then I thought I would say yes to things that say make me uncomfortable. And
Mm,
that's part of my healing path, right? My healing path is to stop collapsing inward and to try to say yes when I can, and something
right.
that's not where if you zoom out, you're like, okay, that's not that big of a deal. Yes, it's anxiety provoking, but in the
Yeah.
state of things in the world that can happen, being on a board for a nonprofit and being the spokesperson, not that big of a deal by comparison. And so
Yeah.
I said yes, and I continued to be sweaty and uncomfortable for many years. Many
Well,
years.
yeah, I love the discussion around how, sometimes it's two steps forward, one step back at times. And what comes to me is like, I mean, it was 30 something years of being conformed and in this specific society and culture, looking at like it's not going to change overnight, right? It's
No,
going to take
yeah,
time, right? Like it was 30 years of mental processes and avoiding feelings. And now I'm not going to just step into a whole new me after 1 week. Remembering that is really important. And the distinction between different journeys, where you mentioned that was part of your path at a time. I'm in my path where if I feel anxiety, it's for me a sign to not do something and like be comfortable just saying no.
Hmm.
Because most of my life was doing things that were uncomfortable.
Okay.
Like in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
military, right? And like going into things because I was scared or of what other people would think or how other people would perceive me. And yet now I'm in this phase of my journey where I'm in touch with that and I'm not always perfect, but when I feel that anxiety, it's like that's a sign of like, no, take a step back. Yeah, I
Yes.
love that. Everybody's journey is
Individual.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Very individualized. Yeah.